Welcome back to CS in 15. I'm Chris,
And I'm Jason.
and today we're covering engaging at-risk customers. So before we actually talk about engaging them, Jason, how do you identify risk?
Ooh, identifying risk sometimes can be a bit nuanced, right? So I think there's always going to be the glaring red flags. They're not talking to you. They're not using the product. They've straight up communicated they don't want to work with you. Like those are almost always going to be evident across any account if they are at risk. But some of the more nuanced things might be, okay, POC turnover or mass POC turnover, right? Think about, I have one customer where we lost the entire marketing team at one time. I was like, okay, that's at risk. Think about people straight up like slowly weaning off of engaging you. So maybe instead of responding to your every email, they respond every other email, canceling meetings frequently. There's so many small nuanced components that can attribute to engaging risk. And this is where kind of like your own CS gut comes into play. If it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. So think of it that way. What about yourself? Any big flags that you look out for to engage risk or identify, I should say?
Really like how you phrased it at the end of like, if it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. The only thing I tack onto that list is if they're not helping you grow. So like if the POC is really hesitant to introduce you or help you bridge a connection with an executive or another team that your technology might be relevant for, because I think a big part of identifying that risk is talking to multiple personas and getting their perspective on how we're performing. And I think when they're kind of like pigeonholing you, it can either be an ego thing or it can be the tool isn't performing and they haven't brought it up. And there are internal conversations or internal negative sentiment that just hasn't been uncovered.
Yes, 1,000 times yes on that. Great example. I lost a customer and they were like, hey, there's only going to be these three people involved in the evaluation between you and your competitor. So I was like, okay, cool. But can we talk to this person? Can we talk to that person? And it was no, 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 no. And just that reluctance to let me go beyond them, let me showcase both what their team has done and worked on, both what we can do as a platform, like that goes such a long way to, again, raising the red flag of like, something's not right here. We probably should think about this as an at-risk account. I love.
And it's like, it does take that CS guy because it is, are they at least partnering with you on how they're presenting things internally? Like it matters on where that champion sits. But I think reluctancy to help you expand into the org, like they know you need budget to maintain your existence. So I think that's a huge red flag. But how do you get them to draw out and like admit to risk or admit to like the renewal is at stake?
I think it's straightforward, right? It's some people have a problem with being blunt on certain things, and I think it again is your comfort level with the people you're dealing with the situation that you're in. Working in pressure, dealing with it day in and day out builds your resilience to be able to handle it. So for me, when it comes to if I think something's at risk, I just ask, hey, we haven't seen great results. We haven't really been able to talk to each other recently. What's going on? Another great phrasing that often CSM should use is, if your renewal was a month from now, would it be a yes? Or what do we need to do to get there? That straightforward tact goes such a long way with getting people to just open up and say what they really want to say or what they really might feel or their perception. So straightforward, always the way to go. What about yourself?
I think that's been the evolution where I've realized that is the best way to go about it. I think there is that discomfort because it's as CSMs, we're so like people, where we want to be friendly. We don't want to talk about commercials. But I think realizing at the end of the day, we're a business. We stay in business because we do business. And that person is doing the same on the other side. And just asking the direct question of like, if this contract was in front of your team today, would it get signed? Or is there hesitation? Is there pushback? Potentially, are there other evaluations going on? And getting them to come to the table and be honest with that. And hopefully, if that relationship has been built, they will actually bring that to you. They might not want to say it proactively though.
No, and so a lot don't. So if you were part of a company that has the ability to read some sort of tech that lets you know what's going on, or even if you can do like inspect your customer's website and you can see a tag from a competitor on their site, like those are small flags that mean a lot. I would also say too, when it comes to them admitting that there is a competitive situation, I think that's also a green flag though, because it means that they're at least willing to acknowledge that they are looking at other vendors and you potentially have an opportunity to do a competitive differentiation scenario to defend your product, your position, and make sure that they still perceive you as the best. So if you get to that point where you're able to get somebody to talk and they tell the truth on what they're reviewing or evaluating, it gives you more of an opening than if they just never say anything to you.
I think bridging there, after you've identified the risk, what is your next step? Like, how do you manage those stakeholders and kind of manage through the risk?
Oh, that's a really good one. And I think this kind of goes to like managing your overall book. General account planning can fit in here. But once you've identified, hey, this account is at risk for whatever those reasons may be, right? Whether it's usage, value, turnover, etc. Defining that account plan and highlighting why this will solve whatever the perceived challenges or the perceived risk is that org is feeling goes a long way. So if you hear from a customer, hey, we're really not seeing the value, we haven't generated a lot of opportunities, et cetera, you need to make sure that whatever you plan out addresses that. So if I hear that, I'm saying, okay, great. In order for us to get more opportunities to grow that value perception, you need to get more campaigns out in market. Once they land on your website, you need to make sure your sales team has the appropriate follow-up. You need to be tracking what is time from first identification to op creation. And if it's too long, you need to loop in the sales team, right? There's so much that can go into whatever the definitive metric is you're trying to improve. But making sure you have a clearly defined plan to get there goes a long way. And then even on that same token, defining that plan and defining the time investment can go a long way. If we think back to when we talked about how do we bucket our books of business, for me, renewals and at-risk customers were my top two. If I know that somebody is at risk and we have 8 months till that renewal point, and ideally want to have that signature with 3 months to go, so I have 5 months to work with, when I deliver that plan, it's, hey, you need to do these 5 major buckets of effort. Each bucket of effort is going to take you 2 to 3 to 4, or whatever the time frame is to get it done. And then the last part there is identifying the who. So we kind of talked about engaging the execs, letting your POC grow or let you grow into the organization, find more people to engage. When I deliver that account plan, I might say, hey, we know we can do X, Y, and Z, you and me together. Great, cool. I also need, though, to get in front of your marketing executive or your sales executive to help with the sales enablement component. I want to get in front of your marketing executive to run an EBR and go through and evaluate what they see as the biggest gaps and so on and so forth. So working that like DRI or the people that you need to have into your account plan goes a long way to fleshing it out and then also letting you grow into the organization.
I like that. And I really like how you emphasize the scoping area. That's one thing I'd call out is like, as you go into it, have those conversations and try to always start with, if they're at risk, asking what will it take you to renew and having the customer define that for you. But one thing I'd tack on there is you have the full right to push back there too. Because I think there are so many situations where if you ask the customer to define it and say you're at like 1.5x ROI, however ROI is defined, they're like, oh, I need to get to 10x before renewal. Good moment to say, that's a really good goal. That's not likely going to happen, right? We have 4 months. We're not going to, within those 4 months, move everything and get ourselves to 10x. Can we at least like show upward trajectory? Like how much of an improvement do you need to see? And trying to get alignment on realistic goals that you can achieve and get buy-in from them to also hold those executives accountable. I also think just collecting that early so that if people start to fall off that plan, you can go back and say, hey, we're working towards achieving this. We're not hitting these milestones. You told me you wanted this from us. Is this still a priority? And kind of securing yourself so you have a little bit of, something in the fire.
Yeah. And I think too, when you have that type of accountability or the ability to go back and say, hey, we talked about doing these 3 things. Item 1 is your biggest roadblock to doing everything else quickly, but you haven't done it yet. Why is that? Being straightforward. If the customer's already at risk and you're being honest with them about what they haven't done yet and what needs to get done, no harm, no foul, right? If they're going to churn, they're going to churn at that point. So you might as well be forward about what needs to be done. But a question for you, what would you say is the balance between being persistent and being annoying when trying to engage the POCs that you already know, the POCs that you don't know, and just overall an at-risk account? What do you find is the right balance for you?
I think trying to get their buy-in on what they want the engagement to look like is the gold star. I think that doesn't happen too frequently. Like sometimes I'll ask an executive, can I give you a biweekly update? And just get a yes from them so at least they're opting into it. That doesn't mean by the 3rd biweekly update, they won't start to see me as annoying, but always trying to add value and showcase that you're bought into that relationship. I will say, especially once risk has been identified, I'm a little okay with being perceived as annoying by an executive because sending them that update of here's where we are, here are our blockers, and providing them that insight are things I don't think internal teams will usually do. And it helps you a lot down the road to communicate that early. It doesn't mean pushing one of your POCs under the bus. It just means saying, hey, we have a blocker. There's a delay here. It could impact our plan. Wanted to make you aware of this, but here's how everything else is progressing. And here's how we're progressing towards that target. and just keeping them informed. So at the bare minimum, it's very clear you care about the relationship and you want us to hit that milestone.
Yeah, no, I think the check-ins with an exec is great. And even better if you can get that exec onto like the planning call. If you can have them involved in that planning call where you're saying, hey, here's what we need to do to be successful, Mr. or Mrs. Exec, I'm going to reach out to you once a month, twice a month, whatever the cadence is to let you know how we're doing. Is that okay? If you can get that approval up front in that planning call, it goes a long way because then they also know what their team should be doing. Did the team agree to it? Was there changes, right? They have a hand in doing that planning, I think goes a long way as well. Now, as you're continuing to engage those execs, at what point do you think it's time to escalate internally an at-risk account? How do you tread that line of like, hey, I need to raise the flags internally. I want everybody to be aware of it at my org, but I also know that I still have some wiggle room to go with this customer. How do you handle that?
Do it earlier than you think you should. I think as a CSM, you are kind of the program manager. Your job in that risk situation, if you've identified this path to renewal, is to work that path to renewal and try to get them as close to that target as possible to get a successful renewal. But that is your role. There are other roles. So I think loop in your AE, your manager, your C-level executives and try to have them multi-threading in that organization and have them surround it. Can we reach out to the CFO and present our value? Can we reach out to this department? Can we get all these threads and have these conversations and get around the org? I think activating those other individuals, so you're bringing a village rather than just you consistently reaching out and only being your voice in the room.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think I personally have a tendency to run with things as far as I can possibly go on my own because I'm just really confident in my ability to manage all aspects of a customer's engagement and lifecycle with whatever company I'm at. So I know I am not the best at raising the flag early to bring additional people in. And I emphasize that because I will always say, hey guys, this customer is at risk because of X, Y, and Z reasons, even though we're a year away from renewal. But I'm often not the best at saying, hey, let's now bring in these 4 additional people who are going to talk to these 4 other people within the customer's organization and do different things. Like that part I'm getting better at, but I'm with you in doing it earlier, right? The earlier that you can say, hey, this customer is probably not going to renew, or there is a potential downsell risk here, the less of a surprise it is to your team in forecasting and planning. I've found oftentimes the CSMs who get the most kind of blowback when customers churn is when they didn't raise awareness that that was coming. So to your point, the sooner, the better, 1,000%.
I like it. I think we're potentially going to hit 15 minutes this time. So Jason, let's close it out and talk about what are your top 3 takeaways or hot takes for engaging at-risk customers?
My top 3, do it early, be willing to be annoying to some extent. I kind of think that's important. And by annoying, I mean frequently communicating, over planning goes a long way to managing at risk. And then the third one is own it. Own it all. If you can take a step back and say, hey, my leadership team, here's all the things that I've done with this at-risk customer, it's going to go a long way to keeping you secure with where you are, regardless of what the outcome is. The worst thing that you can have is a customer who churns and there's no record of what you did to try and save that. What about yourself?
I like that. I think start with a plan and start with that plan high level of, get buy-in from the C-level or budgetary owner first of how you're going to say this renewal rather than just working it and, throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it works and gets a signature. Second, bring that village. Have your AE, have other people have a role in this. At the end of the day, that renewal is revenue for the business. There should be more than just you who cares about it. And I think pushing on that and, putting up that white flag early so that you can very much so say if things go wrong, hey, I tried, I asked you all to support, here's where we landed. And then third, be persistent with those updates. And if balls are getting dropped, call it out, escalate it. I think CC your POC on those emails. I know it can be scary because it can impact a relationship, but if somebody's not doing their job and their job is putting your business's revenue at risk, it is your position to have to go, hey, C-level, your people aren't doing this. We're not going to hit that result because of this. It was not our tool's fault.
And again, if they're going to churn anyway, what's the harm in saying, hey, we're not getting the work that we all agreed to do done? So I think that's a great last point there. But overall, working at risk is something every CSM will do always in our job. It kind of comes with the territory. So being able to identify it early and get it after it goes a long way. So thank you guys. If you made it this far, we appreciate you listening. If you have any feedback, let us know. Otherwise, tune in for episode 4 coming soon.